What is he? Is he a narcissist, a sociopath, a psychopath? All of those things? None of them?
I don't think that he's a psychopath because he's been successful in repeated enterprises over long periods of time, and he has a variety of people who remain intensely loyal to him. Now, he's definitely extroverted to a very great degree, and he's definitely disagreeable. And so that gives him some of the traits that are associated with those personality features. But from what I've been able to understand, he's also very conscientious and hardworking, for example. And so that's a real mitigating factor. And so I think it's very easy to demonize someone that you don't approve of, let's say, and certainly Trump has been subject, I would say, to more demonization than any political leader in the West that I can remember in my entire lifetime, including Richard Nixon. And so that's also set him back on his heels and made him somewhat embattled and defensive, which I don't think did any great things for his personality in some real sense. So I think it's a mistake to assume that Trump is a psychopath. I think it's a big mistake. I think it's a big mistake to assume that Putin is a psychopath. It's easy to do that, but I don't think the evidence suggests that. You don't want to throw those labels around casually. And, you know, if Trump was psychopathic, well, he did a pretty good job of keeping the United States clear of war for 4 years. That's pretty damn remarkable. And he did have a big hand in promoting the Abraham Peace Accords, and that was pretty remarkable. And those aren't the sorts of things that you would expect from a psychopath. He also seems to have a pretty good hand with the working class. I
don't want to put words in your mouth, but you sound like you're a bit of a fan of Donald Trump. Would you like him to run again? Would it be good for America, do you think?
No, I don't think it would be good for America. Would it be good for him to run? That's a difficult question, because it might be that it would be good for America to have whether or not Donald Trump should be president sorted out in the public sphere, debated intensely, and subject to an election. So it might be very interesting to see him put himself forward on the Republican ticket. If I had my druthers, and I say this, I hope with due care, I would rather see someone like DeSantis step forward, who shares some of that forthright strength, let's say, that characterizes Trump at his best, but seems to be a more cautious administrator and a less divisive figure. I think that would be better, because Trump, for whatever virtues he might have, and I think he has the virtues of a Washington outsider, I think that's quite clear. I think that his behavior in the political realm raises the political temperature to a dangerous degree.
Yeah.
And, you know, I say that while trying to give the devil his due and not casting careless aspersions on his name. I think that compulsion, especially in matters of public policy, is a sign of bad policy. If you can't get people on board voluntarily by motivating them with the proper story, then you're a poor leader. And so I certainly would be opposed to anything approximating legal compulsion. Now, we use social compulsion frequently to produce consensus, let's say, and to enforce it, and that's never going to go away, and there's some utility in that. But my general take on the world is that people should be allowed to go to hell in a handbasket pretty much any way they choose once they're adults, although they might be encouraged not to do that and invited not to do that. But I'm not a fan of compulsion for any reason. I think it is a sign of bad policy. If you and I can't play together voluntarily, then we don't have a very good relationship, and it's not going to be efficient and productive. It's going to require force to continue. And we're not having a fight about who has the right to speak freely. That's nothing. That's a peripheral problem, even though that can be serious in and of itself. We're having a fight about whether or not your claim that free speech exists is nothing but a masquerade for your willingness to dominate and use power. And so if I was taking that tack, I'd say, it's all well and good for you to speak about free speech, but look, you're white and you're middle class and you're British and you're privileged, and you have this theory about free speech that your ancestors derived, but the only reason they ever derived that to begin with is so they could exercise their power. There's no such thing as free speech. That's just a lie to mask a power claim. And that's a way worse cynical criticism of the notion of free speech than you can't speak because I don't agree with
I mean, it's a form of fascism, isn't it?
The fascists are more straightforward about it, because they basically come out and say something like, shut up or we'll beat you.
Right.
Whereas the compassionate types who are narcissistic compassionate types, they come out and say, well, we're really trying to save the world, and we're acting in everyone's best interest, and we think it would be better if you should just, regulate what you say. Because if you don't, you're not a good person. And so it's much more, I'd take the fascist bully over the compassionate narcissist anytime. They're way more straightforward.
I mean, we live again in an era where the hashtag be kind almost invariably is used by people who are the least kind people I think I've ever encountered. In other words, people that love to be utterly vicious.
Yeah, well, kindness...
And yet they hide behind this fake persona of hashtag be kind.
Yeah. Well, kindness is tricky, because one of the things you deal with very commonly if you're a clinical psychologist, apart from depression and anxiety, is, behavior therapists offer assertiveness training. And now, the people who need assertiveness training are often people who are too agreeable, compassionate, polite by temperament. Now, the problem with that is that they let people walk all over them because they don't stand up enough for themselves. And the consequence of that is they get resentful, and then they get bitter, and then they get conniving, and then they'll mob. And so, because they'll do anything for everyone else, but they push themselves beyond their limits, and then they won't even recognize the limits because they feel, well, if I'm not doing everything for you, then I'm not a good person. It's like, no, a good person does a little for you. Like if I'm acting properly with you, say in this conversation, there's something in it for you, and there's something in it for me, right? And we want that to be reciprocal. And so the cost of me bending too far in your direction is that I'll become bitter and resentful and conniving. And resentment is an unbelievably toxic state of being.